This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to Uncorking a Story, the podcast that introduces you to the rich world of storytellers who share their personal journeys, creative processes, and the stories behind their stories, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of your writing journey. If you're an aspiring writer, a literary enthusiast, or simply someone who believes in the transformative power of words, you've come to the right place. Every week, we'll pop the cork on the world of successful storytellers and give you a healthy pour of inspiration, insight, and empowerment. My mission is to help writers like you realize your full potential through the transformative and therapeutic power of writing. Whether you're just starting your literary voyage or looking to refine your craft, I'm here to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement you need to embark on your own storytelling adventure. So, are you ready to uncork your story and let your creativity flow? Uncorking a Story is about to begin. Sit back, relax, and let the transformative magic of storytelling whisk you away. Welcome to Uncorking a Story. International best-selling author Randy Susan Meyers' novels have been featured in publications such as People, the New York Times, the LA Times, Washington Post, the Boston Globe, and the Miami Herald. Her novels explore domestic drama, societal issues, and cultural nuances, informed by her years working with troubled youth, community centers, governmental agencies, and criminals and their families. She probably gained the most insight into family and other politics during her 4 years as a bartender in a small Boston neighborhood bar. Pardon the bad attempt at an accent there. Her latest book, The Many Mothers of Ivy Puddingstone, has been described as beautifully written and full of warmth, wit, and wisdom by Lane Moriarty, New York Times bestselling author of Big Little Lies and 9 Perfect Strangers. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Randy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm happy to have you here, Randy, and I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
I think my story as an author began when I was a very little girl, and I learned to read very early by myself somehow, and would sneak read until way into the night. And I would hold my book outside the window. I lived in Brooklyn, and there was a little tiny courtyard, like outside the window. And I'd hold it outside to read, outside from the lamplight. I grew up in the library. Every day I went and took out zillions of books. And Betty Smith, who wrote A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, was that book was my touchstone. And I guess my book is my real, even though I didn't publish my first novel till I was 57, books have always meant more to me than breath.
I love this notion of somebody hiding to read, because I know people hide to talk on the phone late at night, or they hide to maybe watch TV. But hiding to read is fascinating to me. I think it's beautiful.
I don't think there's been a night in my life when I've been able to sleep without reading myself to sleep. Even when I was younger and might have come home from work, with having had a drink or two myself after work, no matter what, I had to read that book. I just can't. It is my lifeblood. What can I say? And so to me, the highest honor I could have in the world was having a book on the library shelves.
Well, I want to talk to talk about your path of getting a book on your library shelves. Before we do, you mentioned sort of having your first book published when you're in your 50s. What was your career prior to that? And I know I read a little bit about that in the intro here, but what did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
Well, I was happy just to be growing up. My background was a little bit tense. That's a good word for it, right? My mom was kind of a party girl. My dad died when I was very young, and he had some drug problems. So I actually do credit the library for keeping me from having a really insane life. My goal at 11 years old, when I was deep into, how you read your way through whole. Like, for instance, I go on binges when I want to know everything there is to know about FDR, whatever. And so when I was 11, I binged on the Holocaust and slavery, making me probably the most fun 11-year-old in Brooklyn.
Light topics.
Like I was a fun gal. Um, and so at that point, I wanted to go door to door, knocking on everyone's apartment, because I only knew from apartments, and explaining these things were wrong. So I think that my wanting to tell stories and talk to people was probably my first goal. I have worked with criminals, worked with batterers, and I was agency director for the city of Boston community centers. I ran a community center. I ran a summer camp. I've had a lot of jobs in human service. Um, and I worked as a bartender for 4 years in a small neighborhood bar. And I'll tell you, I learned an awful lot in that job. About There's a small working class bar in the neighborhood. So I once counted them up, and I had 32 jobs because I started working when I was 13 years old.
Yeah.
And I think they've all flavored me.
Well, a bartender certainly could be included in the list of human services.
Yes, very. Oh man, these guys relied on me. I found I did very well working with criminal men and drunken men. I could really handle them well.
And often the two are very interrelated.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
What's the craziest thing somebody has admitted to you in a bar? Or one of the crazy things somebody's admitted to you in a bar?
Well, generally, what they always wanted to admit to me that they would like they'd come in with a girlfriend night after night, and then they'd come in by themselves and say, "So you want to come home with me?" And so what I would generally try to joke my way through it, and everybody was, it's a small bar, and I'd say, "I'm sorry, I'm not quite clear. Are you saying you want me to come home and sleep with you? Because like we don't know each other that well." And then the most I've had to protect my life a few times because I was the only employee. But once somebody was screaming for a free drink. He wasn't one of my regulars. And, because everybody knew I was on the straight and narrow. And he screamed across the whole bar, "What are you, some kind of a Jew or something?" And so I stopped and I turned and said, and everybody's laughing because they know. And I said, "As a matter of fact, I am." Because they didn't expect to find this, Jewish girl working in this very working class, mixed but mainly Irish bar in the middle of Boston.
Yeah. Well, there you go. The best of humanity right there on display.
Mm-hmm. It was good times, good times.
When did you start thinking about, writing your first book?
Well, actually, I wrote and co-authored and published my first book when I was in my 20s. It was a nonfiction book, and it was called How Couples Cope. And it was about the effect of having children on relationships. Part of the job I was working there at that time. And just when that book came out, which is all about relationships and having children, my husband and ex-husband and I divorced. And it was not as timely as you might think. And so it kind of interrupted my writing career for the next many, many, many years, as I suddenly was a single mom and supporting my daughters and sending them through school and then through college. And so I was always writing, but I just didn't have the time. Plus, I have to be completely honest, since we know each other so well now, Mike. I was getting my doctorate in bad boyfriends. And that took up an awful lot of my time. You can't do that and write. And so it's really when my life became calm. I remarried. My life became very much about the everyday, that I was able to put my craziness in my work and write.
So I guess I should have introduced you as Dr. Randy Susan Meyers.
I think that would have been really nice.
Well, I'll go back and re-edit. How's that? Well, so you kind of get your life back into some kind of a regular swing, no longer with the crazy boyfriends. When do you start thinking about fiction?
Oh, fiction was always my love. The nonfiction that I wrote was purely just that it was an idea that my best friend and I had, and let's do this because we found that we were both running groups for postpartum women. And the main thing they wanted to talk about was their relationship problems. And so that's what it came out of that. And we both love to write and read. Fiction was always what I wanted to do. And so I always wrote, but I have a couple of extraordinarily bad books in the drawer. Um, I had the want. I perhaps have some innate talent, but it took a while for me to have the time to then focus on getting the skills and craft that I needed.
So how did
And
you go
so
about finding the building the skills and building the craft?
yeah, and I've written about this. I gave myself a homemade MFA because I had joined some master writing novel workshops where I now teach at Grub Street. But everybody in these writing groups, they talk about very prescriptive things like, I think the priest should be a ghost. That would work out better. Or, why do you have them go to Italy? Maybe they can actually go. And I was really hungry for not ideas I had a zillion of. What I wanted was more craft stuff, but that wasn't part of where I was. So behind me on my shelves are probably like 100 books that I read and then wrote myself synthesizing papers on to get the sense of how to write, how to take my whatever innate talent I had and make it sharper and better. And that was good for me because I'm sort of autodidactic. I'm not great at being in class, but I love to research.
Yeah. Well, it takes repetition too. I mean, just putting in the work and actually, you don't get stronger in the gym by not lifting weights. You've got to do the work. You've got to flex the muscles. And building your writing muscle. The only way to do it is to write.
I often have students, and they're usually younger ones when I teach my seminars. I usually do like 6-week seminars. Say, but what's the secret? How do you have, it takes so much time. So what is the secret to being able to do that? And they're always thinking I'm going to give them some like magic. Oh, well, you twirl your brush 3 times every morning. And I always say you have to give something up. If you really want to, if you really have a passion for some creative endeavor, whatever it be, writing or something else, something's got to go. You can't do that and go out to clubs and do this and also ski every other weekend for 8 hours a day. You got to, make choices.
Yeah, you got to find the time somewhere because we all have the same 24 hours in the day.
Sometimes some of the younger ones think I have a little secret I'm going to share with them.
Yeah. No, I love that idea of making a trade-off and what is it worth trading off for? What are you willing not to do so that you'd be willing to do this? And I love the idea of you saying going to clubs, because if you're going to the clubs in the evening, you're not waking up in the morning to get some pages done.
I mean, when I finished writing my first book, I was working almost 60 hours a week. Luckily, I was in a relationship, my now husband, with somebody who's as work obsessed as I am. So all weekend I was writing. And he was doing whatever computer work he did as an IT data analyst. I have no idea what he really does. Really don't. But both of us are very, very goal oriented.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to think my wife has no idea what I do for a living.
Yeah, I
Writing. When we went to our little premarital counseling session, this is going back 25, 26 years. One of the first things we had to do was introduce ourselves to everybody else. So I introduced her first. I said, "This is Nicole. She likes exercise. She enjoys reading, and list a couple of her hobbies." And she gets up and says, "This is Mike. He likes computers," and then sits back down. Nothing about me liking to read. Nothing about liking to see orchestral music. He likes computers. I'm done. Sitting down. Goodbye. I mean, she's right. I did like computers.
There you go. There you go.
There's more to me than just that. There's more to me than just that.
I thought maybe you were interested in gold because when I first saw your background, I didn't realize it was quartz. I thought it was gold bullion of some sort. But, well,
right. Look, we got to stockpile gold. You never know. You never know. When the monetary system's going to go down.
It's a great idea. I think I'm gonna, as soon as we're done, I'm switching everything into gold.
Go buy some gold. What can you share with us about the many mothers of Ivy Puddingstone?
All of my books have begun with one flash. Every single one of them, like some flash of an idea that came from once it was being in a rotary, stuff like that. I was at a reunion party for people who had lived in the neighborhood where a lot of the book takes place in Mission Hill, and two women who were best friends forever, about 10 years older than me, said, "Oh gosh, do you remember when we lived in that commune on Schiller Street and we sent the kids to their own commune in Vermont and took turns going up to see them?" And the other one says, "Oh God, they still make fun of us for that." Now, that didn't go on very long. Nothing dramatic or terrible happened, but that idea flashed in my head and it seized it. And then from that, my novel was born. And I had a sense of a mother who's really dedicated to social justice and changing the world. And it starts when she goes to Freedom Summer as a young, white, naive volunteer. And quickly the scales fall off her eyes, and she realizes just how very naive she's always been. And her life is built around saving the world. She's like the 11-year-old I was who wanted to knock on doors. Her daughter wants nothing more than a normal life. And she lives in a political collective, the mom, and they do actually send their kids to a commune in Vermont where they're going to take turns. And you think the problems you're fighting are all outside, but something happens that was quite tragic and brought them realization of it's not that easy. And the book starts in 1964 and goes to 2020. So it's kind of, after a while of writing, I said to myself, my goodness, you're writing a female Forrest Gump combined with This Is Us with the flavor of The Big Chill. And so it's basically, we see this mother and daughter life through their eyes separately. And we follow these five couples from when from when Annabelle's 18 to her in her 70s.
Wow, that's ambitious to say the least.
It was ambitious, and the research was fascinating.
Yeah.
I love writers love research; otherwise, they couldn't do it.
You know what strikes me is a million people could overhear a story about two women talking about growing up in a commune and not think twice about it, just kind of go about their business. But it takes I think somebody with an inner writer to actually have that seed planted and then water it, put sunlight on it, and see it come to fruition in the form of a book that spans 1964 to 2020. I think it's like the writer's curiosity, right? And maybe that's why we like research so much, is because we're just innately curious.
I think so. I mean, last night I did an event where I was interviewed by a wonderful writer and a dear friend, Jenna Blum. And we were talking a lot about that, how writers explore their lives through the page, through stories, through finding out, through research. And somebody asked me in a question from the audience, did you keep journals your whole life? And I think they were expecting I was going to say, well, yeah, and I never have, because I have always wanted to explore the world around me. And somehow living in other people's heads to me has always been my fascination. And also, every writer gives bits of themselves to every character.
No, 100%, 100%. We leave bits and pieces of ourselves on the page, and people might say, yeah, sure, in nonfiction, but no, in fiction too. You're doing it. I mean, that little girl who was reading about slavery and reading about the Holocaust is taking those bits and pieces and memories. I mean, that's been part of your identity, and you're putting it as breadcrumbs on the page.
And I think it's not my thought. There's been research done that reading fiction builds empathy in a very big way. And I think we learn more history from novels in a way that we really inculcated deep into ourselves more than a dry textbook. I mean, there's plenty. I read a lot of textbooks that I have to. My goodness, for one of my books, I read a stockbroker manual from the 1950s. Woo! I didn't retain any of that. But I do think it's a gift to give to the world, not just history of the facts, but what was it like to be somebody walking through that piece of history?
Well, that's how, I mean, that's the empathy building part of it, is kind of building that world and putting that feeling together. And especially, look, you're talking about Freedom Summer, 1964. I can only imagine like the places you had to go to, in your own mind to bring that to life for people.
It it meant a lot to me to get it right, and I also write very. I think there's people not I'm not can't just divide things, but people tend to write either very hot or very cold or somewhere in between. And by cool, I mean more distanced. And I'm not saying it's neither is bad nor good. I've loved novels on both sides. And some people write very hot from the inside out, and I tend to write from the inside out. And so I had to be inside Annabelle, in that jail cell, in that horrible, sad disappearance of a boy that she fell in love with. But I had to do a heck of a lot of research to be able to have that stuff to bubble out. And I always teach people, when you learn what you learn from your research, you're not putting it on top of the novel because that's boring. You're going to have it bubble out through the experience of the characters.
Yeah, you got to weave it through. You can't preach, in other words, you can't preach
No,
around it. Yeah,
no.
yeah, agreed. Do you consider yourself a sort of a method writer? I hear a lot about method acting. Are you a method writer?
I probably not. I am probably a real. My mind tends to go all over the place, so I have to harness it really strictly to give myself room. So I have a very set way in which I plan all my novels, starting with the idea and then writing my little synopsis for myself. This book is about, and I do an outline. I have where I outline three-quarters of the book. I have a Bible that usually grows to about 60 to 100 pages. That is my side piece. And by that, I can then method act myself into the characters, but I need to have that world to live within. It's like having a roadmap to go cross country, but you always let yourself have little side trips.
Yeah.
So I am not somebody who says, "Oh, I just sit and I see where it goes." No, no, I need to know where I'm going.
Right. So you don't pants it, in other words,
Oh no, 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 no,
but
no.
you do have like a world and outline built, but you're not tied to it. I mean, you will take. You mentioned a side trip. You will
Yeah,
divert from the road.
absolutely. Somebody asked me last night that when you write from two point of views, which I do, I have also written from five points of view. Do you write all of one and then all of the other? And I don't. I am very linear. I start with chapter one, and I go through till the end. And people, I know a lot of people who will just write pieces from here and pieces from there, and it works for them. For me, I can't go ahead until I have put down the footsteps behind me.
Yeah.
Probably says something not that great about myself.
You mentioned, having your first book published when you're in your mid 50s or so. What was that like for you when that first came out? What was it like when you first heard the news that, yeah, you're going to be a published author of fiction?
Oh, oh man. The only thing I was probably ever happier about, well, when my husband and I got married, it was probably like when I gave birth to my daughters. And there's that swell of like where you're just overcome with this being. I am not going to compare it to that because I hate when authors compare their books to babies. They ain't babies. But that feeling of it's work, and it's a feeling that you have ascended the workplace that you wanted to. And for me, the fact that somebody believed in me enough to want to bring that to readers was just I love reading. I love connecting with people who read. I love going to book clubs and hearing what they think about my book, and they see all sorts of stuff I never have. But that was one of when I got my agent. Well, it took me a long time to get an agent. Getting an agent is really hard. And then I broke up with my that agent, and then I found another agent. And this agent, after a year of, well, I can only use a Yiddish word. It's the only that fits. Mishigas, with one thing after another. She sold the book in 8 days. So it became kind of whirlwind after that, and it was just wonderful. I can't say anything but wonderful things about that feeling.
Was it 8 days? 8 days of Hanukkah. I mean, did
It
she
was
sell
a
it on the? Did she sell it on the 8th day of Hanukkah? Because that would be
She,
pretty amazing.
I'm going to have to write to her after and tell her about that because she would actually really love that. That's very well, Mike. That you've taught me something. I'm going to use that. I'm going to pretend I made it up and write about it.
It's
No, I'll
yours.
give you credit.
It's yours. Just put a little asterisk by it.
Okay,
Send a link to Uncorking a Story.
I'll definitely do that.
One way I like to get to know my guests a little bit more is through some pop culture questions. So I'm curious, Randy, when you were growing up, did you have any favorite things that you'd like to watch on TV, or did you have a favorite movie when you were a kid?
Mm. I was addicted to Bonanza. I don't know if you know
Oh,
Bonanza.
I know Bonanza because a young Michael Landon was in Bonanza.
Yes.
Right? A young Michael Landon was in Bonanza, and it's one of those shows that my brother and I used to watch on like TBS or something on my grandmother's uh, rabbit-eared TV. We could pick up
Yep.
Bonanza and Petticoat Junction.
Well, Bonanza was, and it's funny. I mean, if I had prepared for this, I probably would have come up with something smarter. Um, but being a fatherless little girl, Lorne Green became my father in
Sure.
absentia, and everybody had a different crush on different people, a different one of the brothers. For me, it wasn't Michael Landon, which probably shows why I went after those bad boys for a long time. It was Pernell Roberts, Adam. That was my guy. So that was the one that I absolutely loved. The movie I remember making the most impact on me was West Side Story.
Okay, sure.
Me and my girlfriends, we would actually in Brooklyn on Ocean Parkway. I remember this, as only little girls can do, go down singing the songs and thinking, and oh gosh, my voice is awful, to that over and over and over. So that was some of the touchstones till I got older.
Did Pernell Roberts, and I think I might have him mixed up with somebody else, was he ever in MASH? Did he ever play
No, no, he was in some doctor's show after that.
Trapper John? Was he Trapper John?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. So there was a character in MASH though, who I think was named Trapper John, but he didn't play him in MASH. He did play him in the Trapper John series.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. What about music? What do you like listening to?
Well, I very quickly, as a in my teenage years, became addicted to. First it was the Jonies, Joni Mitchell, Joan Baez, Judy Collins, all the J's. But then I became into the Grateful Dead for a while. And I used to go see Richie Havens in Greenwich Village at little clubs. One of the best little concerts I ever went to was, oh my goodness, what's his name? He has a really gravelly voice. And one of the things he sang with Dave Van Ronk, cocaine going through my brain. So I was very into folk music for quite a while. And, so I went from the Pete Seeger, very clean, to Grateful Dead. And, yeah, and then the other thing I was addicted to was the Marvin Gaye and soul and all of that. I never was into anything that was like sort of like heavy metal or anything like that.
Well, you're talking to a guy who just saw Iron Maiden in concert last week
Okay,
in
yeah,
in the Prudential Center in New Jersey.
really. Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. But I love the Dead. We could share some common ground there. I didn't get into them till I was older. I didn't really appreciate. I didn't go through my big Grateful Dead phase like a lot of my friends did in high school and college. But I do appreciate their music now, and I know we just lost Phil Lesh, so I have to say R.I.P.
Yes.
To Phil Lesh.
Well, I'll tell you two Grateful Dead stories. Not that I was a big Deadhead, but I will tell you the two stories I have. One is when I went to see them when I was, very, very young, at the Fillmore East in
Phil
Greenwich
Maurice,
Village.
yeah.
And we got in free. I was not such a goody two shoes. I used to like not always do good things. And I had this idea that we could all get in for free if, as we walked in along a big group, we just went like this, like the guy behind us has the tickets, but nobody had tickets. And we all got in for free to the Fillmore, which is supposed to be very hard. So that was one of my Grateful Dead. But the other one is one that probably my husband would not want me telling on the air. But what the heck? Nothing bad happened. I was at a very small Dead concert in Berkeley, which I had driven cross country to go to. And Jerry Garcia comes up to me after the concert and goes, "Hey, my van after." And I look, and I was still the good girl from Brooklyn in some ways because I said, "Yeah, no," because I had this very deep feeling that he was not inviting me on a date or to be his wife.
No,
So,
he was not. I'm sure. I'm sure.
so so I turned down Jerry Garcia. There you go. How's that?
There you go. Well, hopefully Bill Graham or his estate doesn't come after you after
Oh,
listening to this for jipping them on probably what $7 tickets at the time, probably less than that.
probably $2.
Probably.
Oh, you're right. Oh my goodness. Well, the next time you'll see me, I'll be locked up. What can I say?
Yeah, you never
Hmm.
know. You never know. They're litigious. I heard that Graham family, or maybe that's Billy Graham. I'm not sure. Same
Maybe it's
name, two
Graham Nash.
completely different people, right?
Could be. There are a lot of Grahams.
A lot of grams, a lot of grams. I'm curious if you could go back in time and whisper some words of advice into your younger self. So that person who's kind of hiding, reading a book. What would you tell your younger self about what life is going to be like? And maybe you tell them, hey, if Jerry Garcia propositions you, say no. Maybe that happened. Who knows?
I would tell myself so many things. I would tell myself, pay more attention in school. I would tell myself, don't be right. I could always get through school on the barest minimum just by studying at the last minute and passing everything. And it was easy in New York State because of the Regents exams, which people don't know about. But in order to get through anything, all you had to do was pass a Regents exam. And I didn't, and I dropped out of college. I got married at 19. So the things I would have told myself were so huge. I had my first child at 21. So I would have said, slow down, um, take advantage of the brain that the Lord gave you, and don't be running so fast from the past. And but you know what? We do what we do.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could have changed those things. Do you think that many mothers of Ivy Puddingstone would have been in the world? I mean, do you think you needed to have those experiences?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're probably right, Mike. Because I had such a up and I, I did a lot. I got to have I've always felt like I'm somebody who doesn't fit into any world, but I can get through any. I can fit in and get in anywhere and fake it really well. So I could be in a small working class bar and work there for 4 years and get along just fine. I could go to a snooty book club of, women who were very upper class and manage that. And I got to learn. I worked in a tie-dye factory like this, folding things. I worked in a pajama factory. I wouldn't give any of that up. I learned so much.
Yeah, you said you did a lot, but I guess Jerry Garcia would beg to differ.
I guess I think Jerry, my kids will still turn to me sometimes and go, Jerry Garcia could have been our father. It's like, sorry, kids. What can I tell you?
That's right. Well, this has been so much fun, Randy, talking to you. Where can people learn more about you or follow you on social media?
Well, they can, my website, randysusanmeyers.com, has the first chapter of all of my books. It has a lot of writings. I'm on Substack is where you can find my political self, because if I need to rant a bit, I generally do it on my Substack, and that's under my name. And I'm on Instagram, and I am on Facebook, both as Randy Susan Meyers author, and my personal account is also public because I don't put anything out there that's going to hurt me or my kids. So I just managed to, but on the other hand, I'm pretty open.
Very cool. I'll put all those links in our show notes so people can find you nice and easily. Randy, I want to say thank you for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you, Mike. This was actually quite fun.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.